Okay, before we start, let me be clear. This episode is commentary, analysis, media criticism based on public material, standards, and archive coverage. This is not a claim that every individual at Keel acts with racist intent. This is an examination of pattern, framing, tone, and accountability. If Keel believes any factual point here is wrong, then the answer is simple. Correct it publicly, answer it publicly, and let the audience judge. Shreveport, tonight we're not doing gossip. We're not doing rumor. We are not doing emotion disguised as evidence. Tonight, we're going to do an audit. Because local media does not just tell people what happened. Local media tells people who matters, who is dangerous, who deserves grace, who deserves suspicion. That means when a local output speaks into homes, cars, and minds of the city, it does not just report reality, it's helping shape the reality. And that brings me to Keel. The question tonight is not whether Keel has influence. It clearly does. uh, the question is whether Keel uses that influence responsibly, fairly, and in a way that matches the standards it publicly claims to follow. If the answer is no, then the people of Shreveport have every right to say it out loud. Air it out with Pac Man. We the hottest podcast in Louisiana. You know what I'm talking about? Your podcast. It's your boy Pac Man, the Hood's Voice Box. You know what I'm talking about? And tonight is not a hit piece. It's a standards test. This is what happens when people stop just reacting to media and start examining media. So for the next 10 to 15 minutes, I want you to lock in and pay attention because this conversation is bigger than one station. This is about who gets to define truth in Shreveport and what happens when power goes unchecked. When people hear the phrase media accountability, some folks automatically think that means somebody is mad because they got criticized. That's not what this is. Media accountability matters because narrative comes before policy, before public opinion, before reputation, and before memory. The average person does not attend every city meeting. The average person does not read every court filing. The average person does not investigate every single claim. Most people depend on a handful of loud voices to summarize the world for them. And if those loud voices are sloppy with tone, if they are selective with outrage, are comfortable turning certain communities into permanent controversy, then the public does not just receive information. The public receives a frame. That frame becomes attitude, that attitude becomes bias, and that bias becomes decision making. So no, this is not small, this is not petty, this is not personal. This is how power works in a city. Keel is not just some random Facebook page with a ring light and a microphone. Keel is News Radio 710 Keel, a legacy local radio brand to a larger media company structure. It presents itself as a formal news and talk institution. It has named leadership. It has public contact information. It has editorial standards. It has a public file. It has the posture of authority. And once you take that posture of authority, the bar goes up. You don't get to wear the costume of journalism and then hide behind entertainment when people question your framing. You don't get to claim trust when convenient, then claim that the critics are just emotional when your own archive gets examined. If you want the credibility of a newsroom, then you inherit the scrutiny that comes with it. And see, this is where Keel's own words become important because Keel publicly says it separates news from opinion. Keel publicly said it avoids misleading or sensational content. Keel publicly says it corrects substantial factual errors transparently. Good. Those are solid promises. So tonight, I'm not asking the audience to judge Keel by your emotions. I'm asking the audience to judge Keel by Keel's own promises. This is the cleanest standard there is. If your archive reflects those values, then say so and stand on it. But if your archive shows a repeated habit of using race, black public life, and local controversy as fuel for provocative framing, then the public has a right to call out that pattern. What it is, it's a problem. So let's go into the archive because this is where the conversation gets real. When I notice it's not one isolated event, not one awkward headline, not one bad day. What I notice is a pattern where race-related issues and black community issues repeatedly gets packaged through conflict, provocation, resentment, or suspicion. That matters because pattern reveals instinct and instinct reveals culture. One example that stands out in the coverage around the dialogue on race events were the framing that led into the phrase white guilt. Not Now think about it. You could frame a racial dialogue as a serious civic conversation. You could frame it as an attempt at understanding. You can frame it as a tense but necessary community discussion. But when you headline and framing it tilt toward white guilt, you're not neutrally guiding the audience into understanding. You are priming the audience for what? Backlash. This is not a small choice. This is a powerful editorial choice. Another example is the way Black Lives Matter was turned into a poll style opinion frame after real national tragedy. Again, ask the deeper question. Was the audience being informed or was the audience being emotionally activated? Because there's a difference between helping a community process a moment and using that moment to form a reaction. Uh, and then there is the Urban Film Fest coverage, where a black cultural event became a controversy packet, complete with suspicion driven framing and repeat attention to conflict. This is a pattern I want the audience to hear clearly tonight. Not that Keel invented racism, not that every story is false, but that when black events, black causes, or black public conversations come into view, Keel's editorial instinct seems far too comfortable asking the audience to look at them sideways. And once you see that pattern, you can't unsee it. A lot of people think racism in media has to look cartoonish. They think it has to sound like a slur or a direct confession. But modern narrative power is usually way more polished than that. It lives in tone. It lives in what gets framed as dangerous, unserious, aggressive, entitled, chaotic, suspect, or divisive. It lives in who gets grace and who gets interrogation. It lives in who gets presented as a citizen with complexity and who gets presented as a reoccurring problem for the city to manage. And if a station repeatedly wraps black leadership, black activism, or black cultural expression into controversial, heavy framing, then it plants an emotional association in the audience, whether it says the quiet part loud or not. This is why framing matters, because once a pattern enters public consciousness, the damage is not always a lie in one sentence. Sometimes the damage is the atmosphere that you've created around a whole community. Some listeners might say, why does this matter when there are bigger issues in Shreveport? It matters because local media help determine which issues get oxygen, whose pain feels believable, whose reputations get dragged, and whose side of the story sounds normal before the facts are even fully processed. That means local media can contribute to a civic climate where certain communities are always explaining themselves, like now, and certain institutions are presumed legitimate. And once that imbalance get normalized, it becomes harder for the city to have honest conversations about power, race, policing, schools, poverty, development, or justice. So this episode is not just about Keel. It is about whether Shreveport is willing to be honest and about how local influence works. This is not buried history. Keel is still active right now, shaping live controversies, reputations, and public conversations. That means standards questions is not academic, it's current. Uh, if a station has real influence today, then it should face real accountability today. Not someday, not after everybody calms down. Right now, right now. Because if you can publish loudly, you can answer loudly. If you can shape perception loudly, you can correct perception loudly. If you say your journalism is fair, then you should welcome a public audit instead of treating criticism like an attack. Uh, Now, let me also be fair. I'm not saying every controversial headline equals racial bias. I'm not saying every employee at Keel thinks the same way. I'm not saying criticism of black leaders and black institutions is automatically illegitimate. That would be lazy. And tonight is about being sharper than lazy. What I am saying is that the archive supports a serious public question. Has Keel developed a long running editorial habit of packaging race related issues and black community issues in ways that invite conflict more than understanding? This is a legitimate journalistic question, and once that question is on the table, it deserves a real answer. So, what would accountability look like? First, consistent and obvious separation between straight reporting and opinion driven commentary. Second, headline discipline. No hiding behind provocation and then pretending the public misunderstood you. Third, visible corrections when substantial errors happen, not vague cleanups, real corrections. Fourth, a willingness to engage in criticism without instantly painting critics as unstable, emotional, or anti free speech. And fifth, an actual public conversation whether the station's tone has contributed to racial distortion in the city. This is what mature media accountability looks like. So tonight, I'm not asking you to blindly hate Keel. I'm asking you to listen differently. I'm asking you to study how outlets frame race, power, black, civic life, and conflict. I'm asking you to pay attention to what gets emphasized, what gets minimized, and what's get an emotional reaction the audience is being pushed towards. Because once you understand framework, you'll stop being passively informed and start being consciously aware. And that is dangerous to any institution that depends on the public to not look closely. Keel. If your standards are real, stand on them. If your archive reflects fairness, prove it. If your critics are wrong, answer them point by point. But if your archive reflects a pattern of distortion, provocation, and race-coded conflict framing, then the people of this city do not owe you silence. They owe themselves clarity. This has been Aired Out with Pac Man, the hottest podcast in Louisiana. It's y'all podcast. You know what I'm talking about? And tonight, we did not come to argue. We came to audit power. So for the audience, do your homework. Read the standards. Read the archives. Compare the tone. Then decide whether Keel practices what it preaches. And do they deserve the type of authority that this city has given them, especially when it comes to black related issues due to the pattern that exists at Keel. I would argue they don't deserve it, flat out. You may feel differently. Do the research and tell me what you feel is your answer. We out.